Hey TCSTV viewers, it's Evelyn coming to you live from the camera store, and I'm joined tonight by the TCSTV Live Dream Team. Tonight we have Drew and Gary working behind the scenes. Thanks so much for tuning in to our virtual event, Fireworks Photography Seminar, The Nuts and Bolts. The very best part about going live, of course, is being able to interact with all of you. And so be sure to comment, ask lots of questions in the chat throughout the entire event. But if you're not logged into YouTube and you still want to participate, you can also email me. So my email address is evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and I'll be checking that as well. So you have two ways of being able to ask questions and participate. Tonight our guest is Julie Vincent and Jason Lawrence, who have been the lead photographers for GlobalFest for actually over 13 years. And if you're not familiar, GlobalFest is actually a local annual celebration based here in Calgary, and it is about multicultural communities featuring performances, pavilions, international food, programming, and of course, fireworks. And it's on a great spot in Elson Park where you have some water, you get some great reflections, and it's all illuminated and matched with music. So you have great music that's paired with these fireworks, and it's an awesome event to attend. And we're actually going to be hosting a workshop there on August 18th, and I know a bunch of you guys are registered for that. It's full, and so if you're registered for that, we'll be sending an info email tomorrow with all the details about picking up your parking passes as well as your tickets. That's all included with your registration, and so be on the lookout for that. And if you're not registered and you want to attend GlobalFest, if you're in Calgary, then you're also in luck. You can email me. It's evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and I do have some tickets on behalf of the camera store. They're first come, first serve, but definitely send me an email and I will hook you up with some of those tickets. But yeah, tonight with our guests, we have Julie and Jason, and they're going to give you some great tips, some nuts and bolts about firework photography. So we're going to talk about equipment overview, the initial steps in setting up your camera before the show starts, the basic settings that start with at the start of the show, identifying some features and foreground subjects to make your photos more interesting, how to get creative, and then scoping out the site in general. And so I want to welcome Jason and Julie to TCSTV Live.
Thanks very much, Evelyn. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, and of course we were hoping we could have an in-person audience, but unfortunately it didn't work out this time. But we hope to be able to welcome you guys into the camera store very soon. But otherwise, yeah, why don't we just get right into it, and you guys can share a little bit about what you do and the work you've done for GlobalFest.
Thank you. Thanks. Sure. I'm Julie, and this is Jason. As Evelyn said, we've been shooting GlobalFest for about 13 years, and we kind of joined them kind of by accident. We had shot the year before and rendered a bunch of photos to them, including fireworks, and we contacted them and said, hey, you know, do you guys need a team? And they said yes, and here we are 13 years later. So we've learned a lot of things in 13 years, and Jason in particular has become somewhat of an expert in shooting fireworks, and he every year helps our team of volunteers, some of whom are professionals, but a lot of whom we bring on as kind of new photographers. Jason teaches them how to set their cameras up and where to find a place to sit or be or stand, and yeah, so we have lots of fun doing this. So.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and we hope to give you what you need to go to any fireworks show anywhere in the world and have the settings when the show starts to have a good foundation of getting some decent shots and then starting to get creative after that. So let's see what we're going to cover tonight. Who we are, we're going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we've been doing. The basic equipment package for shooting fireworks. There's things you really need to have. And then we'll talk about, like Evelyn said, the basic camera settings, some shutter release techniques and ways of thinking about the shutter, some tips and tricks that we've learned over the years, and then getting creative. So let's talk about who we are. We're award-winning event photographers. We've been shooting events for
a
long time.
Since 2009 officially.
Yeah. We do festivals, we do conferences. We especially like shooting small town rodeos.
Yeah.
Lately we've been shooting a lot of indigenous horse racing. It's an unbelievable extreme sport, and the occasional wedding. Like Evelyn said, we're lead photographers for GlobalFest, which is an international fireworks competition actually, every year in the city of Calgary in August, and for more than a decade, like Julie said. And our current exhibition called Indian Relay is mounted at the Canadian Embassy in Tokyo, and for another 2 months.
2 more months.
2 more months.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little primer on who we are. So here we go. The basic gear you'll need to start shooting fireworks. First and foremost, you have to have a tripod. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can buy a used one, but there's really no getting around this. You have to hold that camera still. It can't move, it can't shake. You have to have a tripod. Preferably with a ball head. It makes adjusting the camera during the show a lot easier. Because the fireworks can be very small, they can be very big, so you need to be able to move your camera around.
So one year, I didn't have a tripod, and I actually sat my camera bag behind me, and I got myself into I sat on the ground with a crouched position and bent my knees and put my camera on my knees. This is not optimal, but it worked. So it's definitely true you are going to do a better job and have more fun if you have a tripod. But if you get stuck, we're going to talk about creativity later, so we'll come back to this have the camera on your knees thing.
Indeed, yeah. The camera that you shoot with, you have to be able to set it where you have complete control of it, where you can have total control over the shutter speed, the ISO, everything. We want no shutter priority, aperture priority, none of that. We want full control over this camera. We also need a way to release the shutter in a way that doesn't shake the camera. That's critical. They can be wired like this, or they can be my preferred one, which is a small wireless one from Nikon, because this way I'm not touching the camera at all. It might even be the self-timer,
Yeah.
the 2-second delay on your camera. That's not ideal, but we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or even a phone app. Some phones or some cameras allow you to connect that way. That's not ideal, again, because there might be a little lag. A reasonably wide lens, but I will say that this is open to interpretation, because if you're really far away and all you have is a 50 mil, then you just have to move further back.
Yeah.
If you're anywhere close to the fireworks, you will need something reasonably wide. The lens I use primarily is a 10-24. It lets me get the whole shot as well as zoom in a bit if I need to.
Yeah, and I'm in a Canon environment, so this is a Sigma 1020, and it's been really reliable for fireworks. So
Yeah.
that kind of range is pretty good. I've also used a 24-105, which is okay. It's not as wide, so it's not optimal, but it works. So.
And it's not necessary for these lenses to be expensive or fast, because we're going to be nowhere near wide open on these lenses, so there's no need at all to be a 2.8 or faster lens. If you've got a zoom lens that is f4, f5.6, that's completely fine, because we're going to be in the middle of the range for aperture. And I will say longer lenses can make for some interesting results. To throw the 70-200 on there, or whatever other telephoto or zoom you have, can make for some interesting shots. Maybe you don't want the entire fireworks shot in. Maybe you want to zoom in on a particular aspect of what you're seeing. So, basic camera settings.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to be setting the camera, whatever camera you have, to manual.
So most of you will know that you're up here, and manual, not P or anything like that. Flip it over to the M on your camera, and that is going to give you full control of aperture and shutter. And that's important with fireworks for a bunch of reasons. One particularly is that some of the fireworks are white, and that can really change. You have to be able to quickly change your aperture and your shutter to accommodate white fireworks, which is to say, so they don't blow your lens out, or sorry, blow your shot out. So Jason will tell you more about that. And
yeah. We're gonna shoot raw if you're able to. That gives us a lot of latitude when in post after the fact, and contains the most amount of raw information, which is good when you're shooting in the dark, like we're going to be. A starting shutter speed, I recommend 4 seconds. This will change depending on your style, what you have in mind for your shot. Personally, for me, I find myself in the 2 to 6 second range generally. I've gone as high as 10 and as low as 1, But looking at the metadata from my past shots, I find that 95% of them are in that 2.5 to 6 seconds. But that's me. You might be different. So, and then the show itself, where you're shooting.
Yeah.
ISO, this is up for debate. Every place you read is say just set it at 100 and just go with that. Personally, I've found myself that I like to turn that up a little bit during a fireworks show, because if I like the 4-second exposure and I like the aperture where it is, well, the only other thing you can change is the ISO. If I want to light my foreground a little bit, I'll crank the ISO up. And again, starting wise, we'll start at an aperture of f11. But this is going to be, for me, this is the one thing that changes the most during the show. This is the one I ride all the time, based on what I'm seeing. For me, looking at my metadata, I find that I'm f8 to f18 generally for 95% of my shots, and I'm just riding up and down during the show based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I'm actually not up that high at all. I'm usually around 5, 6, and 6 for my shots. So yeah.
Oh, this is a really important one. Autofocus, it's really critical that it be off, because fireworks will fool your autofocus no matter how good it is.
Yeah.
So in the first few seconds of any fireworks show, in my case, I'm zooming into 24 and trying to just get focus, whatever I can do to get my focus. Like I said, we're in the f11 range, so we're in a nice little sweet spot for your depth of field, but make sure your autofocus is off and switch it off before the show gets going, so you know you're not going to accidentally be autofocusing, because it will mess up your shots.
It'll mess up your shots. It'll give you a lot of opportunities to be creative later in post.
That's another way to put it, yes. White balance. Again, this is a matter of debate. A lot of the stuff I've read are saying daylight or auto. Personally, I got a tip a few years ago from a photographer, Suzanne McAvoy, to shoot tungsten.
Yeah.
And I've read, I don't know if this is true, that a lot of the makeup of fireworks themselves are sort of towards the warmer end of things. And I found that has held true. It doesn't particularly matter, because if we're shooting RAW, even if we're shooting JPEG, it's easy to change later on. But just I like to get it as good in camera as I can, so that there's less to do later.
Save yourself some work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing that we both do is we have auto ISO on our cameras, because if we're shooting, say, a rodeo and we need our shutters to be at 2000 or something, we let our cameras decide, oh, you know what, we need to bump up the ISO to 4000. That's not good for fireworks.
Yeah, not with fireworks.
That has to be
ISO
off.
has to stay where, you have to set that,
because your camera's seeing a black frame, it will automatically turn it up to whatever your maximum is. In my case, 6400 is what I have my max set to, and we don't want that, obviously, for the noise.
Unless you really, really like a lot of grain.
You know?
Will you guys be touching on suggested ISO levels?
Well, I keep my ISO is always at 100. And Jace, I think you do yours up around 4 and 6 sometimes.
I personally, we're going to look at a bunch of sample images later, just as a FYI, so that you can see what all those basic settings were. I'm personally finding myself 320, 400, even 640.
Yeah.
That's just the way I've developed over the years.
Yeah.
And I've been happy with the results.
Yeah.
So.
And Jace does his work is a little, even though we sit quite close together mostly, his work is a little different than mine. He tends to make big shots that have there are buildings in the site that we're at have his buildings on the one side and people in the front. So his shooting higher ISO like that gives him a little light in the foreground, whereas I actually kind of ignore the humans and deal with fireworks. So.
Yeah. Interestingly, some people will shoot this, and this has to do with scoping out the site.
Yeah.
Some people will think purely about getting the firework, the reflection, and that's it, which is great.
Yeah.
That's a lovely, beautiful shot. I personally like some foreground context. I like to see people. I like to see shapes. I like to see maybe tree silhouettes. Whatever. You'll see in the sample photos that I've tried everything, and I think you've.
Yeah.
Maybe done a little less so, but
yeah.
So
well, certainly the first couple of years we were shooting, there was a lot of trial and error. So now we're here.
And I don't want to say, I get bored with it, but I'm you know,
Yeah.
it's sort of, once you're used to shooting fireworks, it's very easy just to go to the edge of the water, shoot, and get beautiful shots. And then once you're used to it, maybe you start looking around and
Adding some creative,
stuff into the foreground. Yeah. This is one that I've only done in the last 5 years or so, is custom settings on your camera. Setting all these settings up beforehand.
Yeah.
And because when we're shooting the festival, we were actually shooting the festival and the people and everything else. And when it comes time to shoot the fireworks, I don't want to have to sit there and change 10 things. So in my case, Nikon, it's user settings, user 1 and 2. When I set it to U1, I know that I'm ready to shoot fireworks.
Yeah, and Canon's the same. This camera is a 7D II, and it has three C1, C2, C3. So I do that as well.
Yeah.
I set, and I don't know why I do this, but anyways, I set the C3 as just in my mind. I know that that's my fireworks setting. So once we're done shooting the festival, I set up. I immediately turn this to C3. I'm ready to go.
Don't have to think about it.
Yeah, don't think about it.
All right, now the interesting area of shutter release. Like I said, you can have little tiny wireless, which is my preferred method because I'm not touching the camera. There's wired as well.
Yeah.
This can introduce some shake if you sort of pull on it or let it hang or something, so be aware of that.
Yeah, or if you have kids running around near you, or people that are, fireworks, it's dark, and usually there are people moving about. So if you are using a wired connection, just be aware and make sure that it's secure. You don't, especially if you're shooting where we shoot around water, you don't want your camera in there. That doesn't make for great shots.
Yeah, so basically the idea of this is to put the shutter button in your hand,
Yeah.
as opposed to having your hand anywhere near the camera, because any shake will be noticeable. If you've got a straight firework and your camera is shaking, I mean, it could be a cool shot, but it might not be ideal. The self-timer. So if you don't have shutter release available, the self-timer on your camera, every SLR I know of that has it, you would put it on the 2-second rather than the 10-second. You press the 2-second, it obviously waits. Oh. And the downside of this is that it's a 2-second delay, so you're not able to anticipate as easy as if you're instantly releasing the shutter.
Yeah.
So you have to keep that in mind.
So, and I have been recently experimenting with not using a shutter delay, and I don't have a shutter release, so I keep my hand on my camera and stabilize, I stabilize my hand against myself and keep my finger on this shutter button and don't move. I watch on the back, most cameras will have a red light, so you'll know when you're ready to go again. And I'm very, very still, and it doesn't always work, but most of the time it's not too bad. So it's not the preferred method. It's obviously better to have a release, but if you don't have a release and you don't want to, invest in that right away, then stabilize yourself and you can do it.
Perfect. Yeah, that was actually just a question from Lena in the comments here is, what if you have an old camera and you can't get a remote? Can you still do it? And it sounds like...
Yeah, just make sure, my tripod is actually, I keep it about that high. I sit down on the ground. I usually remember to bring something to sit on. Often the sites are wet. If it's raining, a lot of fireworks will still go ahead. So remember to bring something to sit on. So I sit on the ground, I set my tripod up that high, my camera's right on the top, and I can usually stabilize my elbow on my knee or against my body, and I just don't breathe. Well, I breathe, but just be as still as possible. But yes, you can do it for sure.
And interesting enough, I'm opposite. I don't like my tripod low because I'm 6'4". I have my tripod up at max height for myself. I don't have it in front of me, but my tripod, most tripods have the little hook at the bottom of the center post.
Yeah.
Hang my camera bag on that to weigh the whole tripod down helps a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a busy festival where people are moving around you.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised if somebody walks within a few feet of you. It can actually introduce some shake into your camera. So bulb, shooting on bulb. That's not a shutter release technique per se, but if you want to say count in your head instead of being stuck to 2.5, 3, 4, 5 seconds, you can, because on my camera I press the button to open the shutter, press it to release. So I could sit there and count in my head. Also based on what we're seeing, If there is a ton of really bright fireworks, okay, I want a 2 second. If there's a bunch of little stuff happening, I want a 6 seconds, so you can count in your head. That's one way to do it.
And also on bulbs, so one of the techniques that Jason's used before, because he typically will wear a ball cap, is set it on bulb and use the cap. So your camera's on a tripod, and as you're counting, your black baseball cap comes over the front of your lens,
Yeah.
and you can remove it. And that gives you kind of a continuous shot. So
Multiple exposures.
multiple
Yeah.
exposures without having to do that in software. And it's interesting too, sometimes fireworks are not, spectacular all at once. So you will have seen certainly photos of fireworks that look very spectacular, and this is a way that you can achieve that just by covering up that lens. And I would really suggest not use your hand. If you have a ball cap or even a piece of black foam core or anything that you can put, foam core is going to allow a little bit of a light leak, but a ball cap is going to go right over the front. Count, take it away, count for 2 or 3 seconds, put it back. So it's a really interesting technique to
And
use
based
on
on
bulb.
what you're seeing too.
Yeah,
In a lot of fireworks shows, in our case GlobalFest, because it's sunk up to music, there might be a really soft part where it's delicate and light and lovely, and there's not a lot of fireworks happening, but there's some nice delicate stuff happening. Well, you might need 8 seconds for that. During the finale, where there are 50 shells in the air at once, well, you're going to blow your shot out if you have it, open at f8 and it's an 8-second exposure. The shot's wrecked, right?
Yeah.
So it's just the hat just allows you to, on the fly,
control your light.
control the exposure. So those are the basic settings. Let's just quickly go over it again. The basic settings for your camera: manual, ISO of 100, a 4-second exposure, f11,
Tungsten light.
tungsten white balance, auto ISO off is a great place to start.
And manual focus.
Manual focus, that's a key one. So those are that's the basic setting. During the fireworks show, personally, like I said, I tend to keep my shutter in the 2.5 to 6 second range, and I find myself just riding the aperture up and down based on what I'm seeing. I don't know how you...
Yeah, I do that as well.
Is
yeah,
that,
if
how,
I
is that your
see,
main...
yeah, and you'll see after a few shots, if they're sending off a lot of white or really light colored fireworks, you'll know that you'll have to ride that down a little bit so you don't have as long an exposure, because you'll blow out your shot really quickly.
Yeah, I can't count the number of times where I've got a lovely exposure of 6 seconds going on, and at 5 seconds something super bright happens, and your shot's wrecked. So it's it kind of is what it is.
Yeah. This is a really key thing. Your camera is a tool, and the best thing you can do to become a good photographer in whatever environment you end up working in is to know that camera so well that your muscle memory is aiding you, that you don't have to think about, well, where's my aperture, which way do I spin it, where's the back button, all that kind of stuff. So we will often suggest to other students that we teach, make sure you just go out and learn your camera and do it bit by bit or piece by piece. So for instance, if you just want to figure out, all I want to know is how do I run that aperture up and down, go out and do that for an hour and just roll your mind. It's here.
While you're on the couch watching Netflix.
Yeah, just get your muscle memory working. It gets the technology out of the way and lets you focus on what it is you're doing, which is in this case shooting fireworks, but any environment that you're making photos, you don't want to be thinking about the technology in your hand.
Yeah, and personally for me, like if I want to change my ISO, for me, I know it's the second button up and the back dial. That's critical for me to know that I can just feel that second button, switch it without thinking about it.
Yeah, and
because if you have to turn a flashlight on,
Yeah, that is the problem. So, and with Canon, I know that my ISO is right behind my shutter button, and that's a very automatic move. So if you have a new camera that you're not really familiar with, do yourself a favor and go out and learn that technology. Take the time.
It's
I'll also say for those that are coming to the workshop, we will have our team available during the whole time. So if you're not as familiar with the manual settings on your camera, they can definitely help you out. And Gary is laughing because he's one of our techs who's going to be on site. So they'll definitely help you out. So don't have any worries if you're more of a beginner. We'll definitely walk you through the process.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say, for those people that happen to be coming to this fireworks festival, the fireworks themselves are 20, 23 minutes. So you've got plenty of time to play around. So it's not like you have 4 or 5 minutes to, you can relax a little bit.
Yeah. And your goal, yes, of course, is to get a bunch of wonderful photos, but we all know that doesn't happen. You might shoot 50 frames or 60 frames and you might get 10 really amazing photos, but that's great. That's a good outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I might shoot 150 fireworks shots in a night and get 10 or 12 that I really like.
Yeah.
That's completely fine. So this next area is scoping the site. If you know, I'll use GlobalFest as an example. Julie, if you wanna, is just knowing.
Know where if you have an opportunity to scope the site out before you get there, it's a really good thing to do, just have a little bit of a walk around. The festival that we're at does allow certain people to come in early, around 3 o'clock. It's not always necessary. If you can get into the site whatever time they open and just have a walk around and understand where the layout is, and sort of, if you ask somebody, if you're not sure where they have their cannons located, it's a good idea to just ask somebody who's familiar with the site, where are those cannons, and that will give you a good idea of where to shoot. You're going to watch for where the trees, if they have this site that we're going to, there is a part where there's quite a bit of trees in the background. So although that gives you a really interesting creative effect, it's not always the best. So if you get a chance to have a look, if you can't go to that the site you're going to, you can always go onto Google Maps or Apple Maps and have an overhead look like we're seeing here.
So this, very conveniently, Apple Maps happens to have, this is called Elliston Park, where this festival happens to be taking place, and the photo they're showing, very conveniently, happened to be taken during GlobalFest. So we can actually see, if we zoom in here, that's the actual fireworks, the mortars and all of that stuff, and the park itself. So whatever festival or show you happen to be shooting, looking at it on the maps, if you know roughly where the fireworks are going to be, you can at least get a rough idea of where you might want to go when you get there. I recommend getting there a couple of hours in advance so you can, of the show, to really look at things in the foreground. That's me, I like stuff in the foreground. And
in the daylight too, because normally you're going to arrive when there's still a bit of daylight, and you don't want to be stumbling around in the dark trying to find a place to shoot.
Yeah, and if you happen to be lucky enough to shoot a park like this or show like this that has water with the reflection possibilities, that's good to know beforehand, and picking out a spot, because 20 minutes isn't really enough time to pick up and move, especially when it takes 15 minutes to walk around this park. So this is really critical, is to know where you're shooting, or have an idea once you get there where you'd like to go, and look for interesting things to maybe put in the foreground. Maybe that's nothing, maybe you just want good reflections. That's up to you.
Some of this is creative, as Jason's saying here, this is up to you. So, there are some rules-ish about what settings you're going to use, but in terms of what images you're going to make, that really comes down to your style and what you sort of have a goal of making. Or if you've never done it before, it's no holds barred, and you'll just see the magic at whenever you get into your computer and download your stuff.
And one thing I'll say about scoping the site, in this particular site, there are spots around this shore. One year they have this, for lack of a better word, pond scum that was right in front of you.
Yeah.
In certain spots. So if you're there a couple of hours in advance, then you know that there's a spot, there's 30 feet right here that has none of it. That's good to know. Yeah. So that when comes time to shoot, you're not stumbling around in the dark. So that's critical for the site visit. Anticipation.
It's worth, so with GlobalFest, I will often sort of sit down and just watch for a couple of minutes and just get an idea. This festival and a lot of festivals, especially competition festivals, there's several competitors, so it's just worthwhile to just sit and kind of see where they've got their stuff or where they have their stuff laid out. If they're doing a lot of low fireworks, you can just get a bit of a feel in the first few minutes.
So as far as anticipating when the shell's going to go off, I'm sure most of you have been to fireworks shows before, but if you look close, you can see that little shell. You can hear it launch, and you'll see the little trail shooting up into the sky. And if you can press the release right before, ideal.
A really nice shot. One thing to know with fireworks festivals in places where they're far away from people, so they have lots of room between the audience or the observers, they will use much larger cannons, and we're going to show you what these cannons look like. So with the Calgary Stampede, actually, we hear this quite often. Oh, the fireworks are so low and they're small. The Stampede, where the Stampede is located, it's very close to homes and people, so they
middle
are.
Of the city.
Yeah, it's in the middle of the city, so they're restricted to a 4-inch diameter. So it's about that big cannon. Whereas GlobalFest and a lot of these big fireworks festivals, they're not restricted to that. They are often with 12. A 12-inch cannon, so they're big.
And not only that, not only are they bigger, they go higher.
Yeah, they go really high.
Which you have to think about when you're framing your shot. And in our case, this particular festival, the fireworks are timed to music. Technically, it's not like somebody's sitting there hoping to get it on the beat.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the technology is, but the shots are on the beat. So that's another good way to anticipate. Listening to music, listening for the crescendos. If you hear a big cymbal crash coming, in all likelihood, 95% of the time, there's going to be a big firework on that beat. So if you're lucky enough to be shooting a show with music, it's amazing for anticipation. And again, foreground for me is really important. I like the context of seeing people's heads or whatever. That's me. Oh, here's a shot. Here shows you the shells. The one in the basket and the one on the left side there. Those are the little tiny ones that you see at a lot of inner city fireworks shows. This big guy on the right is
big.
Yes. It'll be a massive explosion and go way higher.
Yeah.
So, on that note, he's leaving enough height in the frame to allow for the full height of the burst.
Yeah.
So, you might have to wait for a couple to. In my case, you kind of get an idea pretty quickly of what the maximum height of this particular show is going to be, and I, set the top of my frame just below that, or
And that's where your wider lens comes in, obviously, because then you can zoom out and get, if you need wider. I often shoot wide, and that gives me a lot of white space. In this case, it'd be black space, and that's fine. I want to make sure I have the fireworks in my shot, and I'll crop it down later on. I'm shooting it.
Just worry about it later.
Quite raw files, and they're big, so worry about it later. And if you're not sure, that's my suggestion: is shoot wider than you need and crop it down later.
There was a question here about from Marianne that she just got a 12mm lens. I was wondering if it would be useful or too restricting. What's your thoughts on that?
I think a 12mm, that's pretty wide,
fine.
So it's probably going to be pretty great, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends a little bit on if she has a full frame camera.
Yeah.
True enough. Yeah, that might be a bit fisheye-y.
But definitely give it a go.
Yeah.
It depends on how far back you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we always have to remember that what we do as photographers is, yes, part technology and part technique, but a lot of it is creativity in the end. We'll show you some photos here later on that I actually shot when I had no idea what I was doing with fireworks. And I had to resort to making some creative edits to them. And so I guess the thing is, relax and let it happen, and do your best and learn from the process. And next time you shoot fireworks, do a little differently and do other creative things.
You're not necessarily going to be an expert in 20 minutes. It might take, and that's the great part about this thing, is that every show's different. There's a million different places to shoot in a particular site.
I just one image that I shot was really terrible, and I thought that I was going to have to dump the image, and then I turned it into a black and white, and it's so ethereal. I'm so glad I didn't delete that image. So I don't know if we have a photo of
black
that.
and white.
Oh, I don't think we brought it, but anyway. So don't be afraid to. If it's not a great shot, there's no downside to doing something creative with it and seeing what happens.
One other thing, generally speaking, fireworks shows will happen right after sunset for the most part. Sometimes they're really late, if it's a New Year's Eve or something.
Yeah.
So if you're able to point your camera east, away from the sunset that just happened 20 minutes prior, you're pointing into the dark, which is a way to just help your exposure a little bit and help your vibrancy of your shot. With every fireworks show, there will be smoke buildup, so pay attention to the wind. There's nothing you can really do about it because it might shift. But if you can nail a few shots early before the smoke builds up too much, that would be great. But with new tools in post, dehaze is a bit of a miracle worker for this kind of thing.
Yeah, and that said, even in that case where you do have a lot of smoke in the sky, sometimes that provides you a really interesting creative look to the image. I know the very crisp firework shots are, really popular, but I love it when I get something that, okay, now this is difficult to deal with. What am I going to do? And smoke will do that for sure. And rain's fun.
We'll show you some rain shots because so often people go to the show expecting a glassy water.
Yeah.
You get that 10% of the time if you're lucky.
Yeah, in our city, we'll often get these really, really rapid onset rainstorms that will go for about 10 minutes and then they go away.
Or wind.
Yeah. And you're absolutely drenched and your camera lens is covered with water. And again, there's a creative option there when you have water spots on your lens.
Yeah, I actually have a couple shots in here it was a finale one year and it was absolutely tipping it down with rain. What can you do? They were going to fire them anyway, so we had to shoot it. So we have some shots here, and pay attention in the top left, you'll see the basic settings. A lot of my shots you'll notice are ISO 640. That's just me. So I've categorized these into a few different areas. What I call regular fireworks shots, which is basically the whole burst, maybe some foreground, the whole thing. I've also got some creative shots that are unusual framings and some with the zoom lens.
The creative shots are me trying to rescue stuff. That's what
Julie
those are.
is really good at the creative shots.
He's a much more technical shooter than me. I kind of shoot from the heart is what I call it. So.
Yeah.
But we get a really interesting combination of work, at the end of the night because we shoot so differently and our motivations are quite different.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, I set this frame up. Yes, I know the top of the firework is cut off, but I like this foreground of these silhouettes of people watching. In this particular case, 5 seconds at f14, ISO 640. This is another one where I like the highlights of the color around the people's heads. You can see it's a little windy on the water. It's not a perfect reflection, but it's quite a nice shot.
Yeah, it's pretty.
This one I picked out. I would have preferred if the people on the right here weren't there. If it were just these two, there's not really much I could do about that because it's a decision I had to make in a couple of minutes. I had to pick a spot. In this case, my tripod was really low, like might even have been flattened out a little bit because I wanted this silhouette. This is just pretty much, this is again what I'm calling a regular fireworks shot with just a bit of reflection. And you'll see that I'm generally in the 4 second, f14, ISO 640. This is a shot that I really like. This isn't us. This is a guy that came out to shoot with us named Tim Wynn. And this one, the firework isn't the main thing in the frame. It's this lovely crescent along the bottom here of the bowl at this particular place where we're going to shoot of all this lovely crowd.
Yeah,
it's a really nice shot.
And this is a really good example of Tim is such a pro. He definitely scopes out the sites when he comes to shoot with us, and he saw that bowl was going to give him a really beautiful foreground. And you can see in this shot that there are people there with their cell phones, so that also is kind of like that concert look where with the used to be the lighters. It's the modern lighter.
Yeah. This is one where the water was pretty glassy that night. F16, it's closed down pretty good, so I have some good silhouettes happening here with I like these peaks of these tents. This happens to be the VIP area in this particular festival we go to. I like the peaks and how they're lit with the fireworks color. Same thing here. The water is really glassy in this particular shot. The fireworks aren't super spectacular, but I really like the little people down there on the bottom. It's an example of a really good glassy water. Same with this one.
Pop back into that shot there. So in this shot here, these people are very small, and it's an interesting effect because the people being so tiny gives real scale to the size of the fireworks in this park. And this is how you know they're using these huge cannons, because those are yeah, so don't worry about small people, because sometimes that's a really good way to show scale.
Yeah, and again, more of the same, probably from that same night. This is another shot by Tim. Might even be close to where I shot the previous shots, but this one's just wider, where the firework is actually quite small in this photo. But I love this little shape around the right side of the frame, of the curve of the color windows, the purple violet windows there. Amazing.
And this shot gives us a real sense of how big this space is that we're shooting in. You know, tight shots are really interesting, but this, I don't know, this kind of gives me a little bit of a breathless feel because it's so vast.
And
it's nice, the moon,
a full moon that night,
I was lucky.
So this is one just a little bit zoomed in, where I don't have the firework. Isn't the main thing. It's just I like this. I really like this shape down on the side here. And this is an example of a rain shot. This was the finale, I think, of 2019. Yes, and it was absolutely tipping it with rain.
We were so wet.
So you know, you don't get the beautiful, clear reflection, but you get kind of an interesting wash of color there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it almost looks like the effect that you might get if you had a very slow shutter, or if you had an ND filter on your camera. So we're not seeking perfection, we're seeking to work with what elements, the elements as in rain, wind, whatever we have, we're seeking to work with that.
Yeah, as we have no choice.
Yeah, and this was interesting. This night here, as Jason said, it was absolutely drenching, but there was no wind. So we had this very interesting effect on the water, but then we had these beautiful, still, you know, typical fireworks. So it was a nice effect.
Since you're talking about rain, there was a question here about how do you protect your camera or your lens from rain when you have torrential downpour?
So this is where, again, we're very different. So Jason has, from the camera store, purchased lens covers, and he covers his camera all up. I'm like, shopping bag, it's fine. So
well, I'm going to post a link, not to the shopping bag, but to the
But yeah, to that. But if you don't have something to cover your camera up with, and you have some plastic of some type, and if all you have is your jacket, then, and you're concerned if your camera's not weather sealed, then, you know, put something over it. Usually these fireworks festivals are 20 minutes, so you're probably not going to drown your camera. And I always have a shopping bag in I just stuff it in there. I just have one. So you just cut the corner out and just pull it over your lens, and then I use the lens hood to secure that down, and then your hands are up underneath.
In this particular case, I remember exactly, because the water droplets were getting on my lens, because it was windy in it, they were coming into the lens straight in. So I kind of quickly fashioned a rough kind of umbrella with plastic, I think with the
good stuff.
The good stuff. It wasn't ideal. I would love to have had a little umbrella with me that I could just kind of hold there. I didn't. Yeah. So it kind of is what it is, but yeah, it's a challenge.
We even carry a disposable 2-pack for $9.99.
I think that's the one I had. I think
it has a little drawstring.
Yeah. That's what this was.
Works a little bit better than a plastic bag.
And that, just as we're talking about gear, that's another thing to think about bringing. If you check the weather before you go, but it's worthwhile getting one of those collapsible umbrellas. So that goes in your left hand. Usually people are pressing the shutter with the right. So yeah, a little collapsible umbrella is really useful to have.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Yeah, so that's, and this is just kind of another standard. This one personally is blacker than I normally like my shots.
That's mine. That's me trying to rescue not a great shot, and that's what happened.
I like it.
I know. Well, I loved it when I finished it, but yeah, it's not a typical shot because I was really new at shooting fireworks at this point, and so yeah, I was able to rescue it, and I love what happened with the band of it came like stars. It looks so fantasy to me, so I really liked it. But yeah, it's definitely not a typical fireworks shot. So,
and this shows the buildup of smoke. Like I said, there's nothing you can do about it. You hope that it's blowing exactly back, so it's away from you. It never is, but If you get lucky, great. But like I said, this shot would benefit from some dehaze because it would help this a lot. Again, this is a shot that personally it's very black, and this is, you know.
But I love that.
Exactly,
But
yeah.
that's where we differ. He
Totally.
likes to have more depth in his shots, and
Yeah, so this is a little more this is my shot. But so I framed this one up very specifically with these 4 people at the bottom here because I liked their silhouettes. So that's I was walking around because when we're shooting a festival, we often have to shoot
millions of things.
the people on the stage
Yeah.
talking and then rush to a spot to shoot fireworks. So I had, you know, like I said, a couple minutes to pick this spot, set up and go, which makes your user settings that much more handy.
And again, there are those tiny, tiny little people that you would never shoot in not very many other incidences, but where you've got fireworks, that just gives you such a good reference to how big these particular cannons are.
Yeah.
And I like how you kind of looked out with them being a little bit spaced apart, so you have that little negative space in between
Yeah.
each of them to create the unique silhouettes.
Camp
Yeah.
chairs, and we don't. What year did we shoot this? Forced social
2017.
distance.
For a little bit.
2017.
Yeah, camp chairs, force your social
And like
distance.
and this is a little more my style with this stuff being a little more bright, these people being a little better exposed. That's just what I'm aiming for generally. So I turned my actually I only had ISO 100 there anyway. It was 15-second, that's why.
At f/22, so that's quite a.
And again, this is a shot that was really windy, so you can see the water there. It made a really lovely color wash there. Not the perfect reflection, but that's fine.
Yeah.
It's a really nice effect on the water there. This is a Julie shot.
Yeah, this is one of mine. And again, like this was when I was quite new at shooting fireworks. I don't remember what white balance I shot that on, but I remember getting that that photo out of my camera and thinking, oh, it's very yellow. So that I shot as a raw image, and so I just pulled the but the temperature slider right down to probably about 2600 kelvins, and then I loved it. Then it turned the really horrible yellows that were in here and the greens, pulled them right down and became this blue. I don't know. I kind
It's
of really
ethereal,
tend
this one.
towards the ethereal kind of fantasy looking fireworks.
And I've also noticed that you get the whole reflection in the bottom. That's not usually what I do, but it looks cool.
There's a reason I do that too. We'll show you an image later on the reason I do that.
And vertically too.
Yeah.
You shoot vertically
That's
sometimes.
true. Yeah, I tend to shoot verticals. Yeah.
I don't know why.
Which, if you are shooting for a festival or something like that, it's good to have the verticals because they like to use those for social media,
Especially in the
posters.
days of social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. This is another one of mine where I like I might have pushed these shadows a little too much, but anyway. I just like this foreground activity, this person with their tablet out. And I saw this speaker stack on the left here and just panned left a little bit. And I just dig the shape.
It's kind of a neat effect too, because a fireworks festival with the music and all that kind of thing, it does have aspects of a concert. So the speaker stack is kind of important to, especially if you're archiving for an organization or for yourself. It's nice to have that in there as a point of reference of what else was going on.
Yeah, like I personally don't care that the fireworks are blocked a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I just enjoy the shape. Same spot. This one is just a kind of a standard shot up at the top of the bowl in this particular location, where I just like these shapes. It seems to be my thing is silhouette shapes.
Yeah.
That seems to be what I'm drawn to.
Which is weird because you don't shoot a lot of people. So when we get to this,
I like them
Yeah.
black and faceless, I guess. So in this case, I sought these trees out very specifically because I just liked my silhouettes. I didn't care that they were blocked. And someone happened to walk through with one of these blinky blink toys,
yeah,
and they walked through the bottom of the frame there during my exposure.
yeah.
So it was kind of it's kind of a cool effect,
And that there will give you, that gives you a visual reference that this is a 5-second shot because that's how far that person was able to get in those travel in those 5 seconds. And these trees, I really love this shot because the trees are such an interesting, the whole shot with the person moving in these trees and this fantasy thing. I love that shot so much.
And and I think when we've been shooting fireworks for so long, we're just looking for different
Yeah.
shots.
There's a question here from Jack Stem if you've ever used a star filter before. Or like Lens Baby, anything like that to get some different specular
You
highlights?
mentioned that a few days ago,
Yeah.
and it intrigues me. I'm going to show you a photo on our creative side that looks a little like that Julie
Yeah.
did, but I haven't personally, but it would be cool to try.
The thing with the fireworks, and I shoot real estate, and I often get that starburst effect because I shoot 5-shot brackets for real estate, and the long shot is often, it allows the light to crawl, and that happens in fireworks as well. You're shot at 5 seconds, or sometimes with Jason shooting 15 seconds, you are going to get this crawl. So this one here, you'll see that the light is crawling, and that's not anything other than the fact of a long shot, a few second long shot.
Yeah. This one I wanted to show just because in the bottom there you see this pond scum.
Oh, lovely.
This particular year, it was just horrible. There was not a thing you can do about it. It was just going to be in your shot. So, sometimes you just have to live with it. And I think this is just another...
Don't touch it.
This is
It's
another rain.
gross.
Don't touch it.
Yeah,
It's gross.
it's gross.
And this is another these are just rain shots. Just standard rain shots. So, now we're going to look at some creative or zoom. Let's look at zoom. When personally, I sometimes take the 7200 and throw that on during the show, because why not? Let's see what strangeness we can do. The shot that you actually saw on the social media was this one, where this was actually my kit lens, the 18 to 105. I just pulled it in straight to 105, and this is what you get. You're kind of taking a bit of a risk because you don't know if that spot you're zoomed in on is going to have anything in it, but in my case, I happened to get these 3 bursts, and I kind of lucked out. Similar to this one, this is the kit lens as well. And just more of the same. F18.
The point with these, though, is yes, there is the typical fireworks shot, and it's obviously good to get those, but it's important, I think, for people to step out of, the sort of the expectable, this is what you should get. I personally don't think there's a whole lot of you shoulds in photography. So these shots here, which are unpredictable and not the standard shot, if you, for instance, were shooting for an organization or somebody, this shot here allows what's white space, but it's black, and somebody could put text on there, or you could put text on there and use that as a really interesting means of promoting your work. So
as an Instagram
it's
story
a good idea to have some non-standard things that you can use as a creative basis.
And this is my favorite little point there at this particular site, but just zoomed in a little bit because I just really like the shapes. Yeah, these middle fireworks bursts are a little blown out, but I don't really care because that's a fact of life when shooting fireworks. You'll have these spots on your histogram that don't look ideal, but they're fine. Same thing. I love the little people silhouettes. That's kind of my thing.
This one's so fun because it reminds me of what happens when you use an angle grinder on metal. You get that very similar, sparks flying up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of atypical, that shot.
And this one is where I did put the 70-200 on there and zoomed straight into that.
Yeah.
Having that little sign there isn't ideal, but it kind of is what it is. I like that you can see the mortars in the background. You can actually see the nuts and bolts of this fireworks show.
And you can see how smoky that was, and in that instance, the smoke kind of enhanced the fireworks that were there.
Because they're just kind of shooting off the top of the frame, and it's kind of interesting. I think I'm addicted to the silhouettes anyway, the more I look at these shots. Just more of the same. Oh, this shot here, one year I decided to, this shot here, as a reference, this shot is 90 degrees off to the other side, basically shooting the fireworks from the side. I wanted to try it and see if I got anything cool. Generally speaking, I didn't. It was a terrible place to shoot fireworks from. But in this case, I zoomed in a little bit on the trees, and I got this, I think was my only nice shot of the night that I liked. So try different spots. Sometimes you'll not get a thing. Sometimes you'll get something neat.
Yeah.
All right, creative. This is Julie's area of expertise, I think.
Sometimes this is Julie really trying to pull it out when she hasn't done a great job.
I don't know if this was on purpose or not. This shot was out of focus, but
I did crop that in because I thought it was cool close up. It reminds me of those, I think they're grad photos that people use that weird laser background. It kind of reminds
The
me of
80s,
that. So yeah, the
Miami
80s.
Vice.
Yeah. But I often think about, okay, well, this shot isn't a typical shot. What can I do with it? Is it interesting? What could it be used for? And it kind of, in this case, it gave us a place to stick our logo, and we could put text on this shot. So yes, it's not typical, but it's a usable shot.
I'd like this on my desktop. Like, this would be a nice desktop for my computer.
I'll sell it to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's nice. This is a really interesting shot that I really love. During this is yours.
Mm-hmm.
During this shot, Julie did a focus pull. So, I don't know. I love this sort of thing because it's different. It's, down in the bottom here, you're going, what's going on with these lights? This was a focus pull.
So we have to explain this because I do two.
Yeah.
I use two techniques. This focus pull is where you're actually changing the focus of your camera
During the exposure.
and I don't know how long that exposure was. Probably I'm typically.
You actually eliminated all your metadata, which is.
Oh, did I? Oh no! Don't do that. Probably that's 4 seconds because I kind of sit around at the 4 seconds. So that's a focus. I'm shifting the focus as I'm in that shot. Yeah. So when I know it's 4 seconds, so I'm kind of counting in my head 4 seconds. The other one, though, that I also use is a focal distance pull. So you'll see a zoom pull.
This, I will say, you have to be, obviously, because you're touching the camera.
Careful.
You have to be careful.
Yeah.
You have to be careful because you can shift
You can see
camera.
it actually in that shot. If you look at the uprights, they're not uprights, but you can see that there's movement in there because it's kind of stuttering.
Yeah.
And
but does it matter? I don't know.
No, that technique, it does hide a little bit of your evils, because that is the focus is moving. So it's sometimes, and this is actually where my zoom is changing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally different and wild and.
Yeah, and I loved it because everything in the middle is going to stay where it's at, but the lights and the little buildings that are there, and on the left-hand side, actually, that's the street, the big major street that's on that side. It reminded me of, I don't know, something blasting off and like a runway, like when you're going down a runway in a plane at night, if you kind of squint your eyes, you will get that effect. I don't know. I thought I liked it.
Like I said, when you've been shooting them for so long, you want to try some different things. Now that we've seen this, I'm going to try some focus pulls this year. I've never done that before.
Okay.
This is another focus pull that Julie did. Super ethereal. It just is very fantastical, and I don't know.
It's fantastical, yeah. And honestly, again, I saw that image. I didn't like the color of it. I had shot it on whatever white balance. I probably shot it on auto because this is an early image, and I didn't like it. I didn't like anything about that image, so I thought, oh well, whatever. I'm going to dump it, so let's play with it. And then I ended up not dumping it, obviously, because I really, really love it.
Yeah.
So
these, these are yours.
Okay, so sometimes I get an image that's pretty good, and I don't love it, but this is a composite image that I pulled into Photoshop, I think, and I just basically
cropped it, mirrored it.
The middle of it is where the water is at this place we were shooting, and I turned it on the side and mirrored it, and then I got this thing that's kind of like a bug, and
it's a bit of an art piece.
Yeah, and I mean they're
similar with this. This is like a Rorschach or butterfly or something.
And the people we're shooting for, like GlobalFest, that we're shooting these images, they're never using that. But that's cool. That is something that I'm quite happy to put on my Instagram because it's not the typical firework shot, and it's representative of me, the creative person, not me, the person that's making work for the people that we're shooting for.
Something you created in post.
It's so fun to do those too. Just turn it on the side and mirror it, and it gives you all. And I don't know if other people can do this, but I can't quite imagine that shot until I actually make the mirror.
Yeah.
So I'm always quite surprised by what they look like.
So this is one by Tim Huynh again. That's a completely non-normal crop, and it's just a spectacular photo.
Yeah.
It's from that same sort of area where you can see the point here. But I love this crop.
Yeah.
I don't know how exactly you'd use this, but maybe a banner on a website or something. But
it's so cool. That shot is so interesting to me because he didn't crop out the lights on the very, very right-hand side of that image. It's almost like Nightmare Before Christmas or something that's very cathedral-esque. Anyway, the point is, we can fall into that, well, it has to be an 8x12,
Yeah.
which is out of the camera, or it has to be 4x6, or it has to be 5x7. It doesn't. Your Facebook, for instance, your Facebook header, you can look it up and it'll tell you exactly what the dimensions of that header. Well, this is a beautiful shot to use as a Facebook header. So I guess I would encourage people to explore different crops and non-conventional crops. And if you
Yeah,
end
why
up
not?
with a photo that you absolutely love and it's a non-conventional crop, almost no matter where you live, either you can walk into a framing shop or you can go online and get, sort of a custom frame.
This would look beautiful on aluminum
Yeah.
or something.
Oh yeah, that would look gorgeous on aluminum. So yeah, don't be constrained by the constraints of crop.
And I will say that normally white fireworks like this don't photograph that well. I just colored fireworks are
Yeah.
just nicer, but this is a great way to shoot these white fireworks because it's a spectacular crop. And these next shots are, we had a young student, I think went to university.
Yeah.
Her name was Kat Lamb. Her tripod, either it broke or she forgot it or she couldn't get back to where it was stored in
Yeah.
time. So she had no way to support her camera. So she just put her camera on the I think this is on the subwoofer, and you can't even see the fireworks. But I don't know. I kind of dig this shot because you're like, what is going on? So
It's very journalistic, and
it's different.
It's observing the observers, and that's why it's interesting to me, because
Yeah.
people come to these festivals and they certainly don't think that they're going to be. They know that people are there with cameras, certainly, but they don't ever think that they're going to become the subject of. They're going to be the observed, so they're fun.
So just for fun, we're going to show you a few shots. We got to go back behind the scenes one year and see what these look like before a show is shot. This is pretty rare to get because you have to be licensed to be back here because everything is wired and they're explosives.
So we were not allowed to get it. We went back on a golf cart and there was no getting out, getting out. You just sit there with your arms in nice and tight and watch.
And it's just fascinating to see
Yeah.
what these things look like.
It's
behind the
remarkable
scenes.
to me that back there, I did get out of the golf cart, didn't I? I wasn't supposed to do that. It's remarkable to me that this back area is quite, I don't know how to explain it. It's very industrial and it's almost like a war zone in a way. You see this, the beautiful space, and then all this gorgeous light and stuff comes out of these industrial cannons. I was really surprised by what that looked like back there.
So this is pointing back exactly on my little point that I like, where all those people were standing, right in front of this mortar that's pointed straight out.
Yeah, from
the
exactly
other
the
side.
other distance. Yeah.
So yeah,
So
that's all we got.
that's all we got.
Awesome.
We would love to answer some questions.
We do have some questions,
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll start off with one in the chat here from Marion. If you're doing a focus pull, how do you get the lens refocused again for the next shot?
Quickly and carefully.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much you can do other than, if it were me, I'd just zoom straight in, quickly do my focus, and zoom back out.
And
again.
I kind of, you can sort of feel like if I can feel where my hand's going. So I know I've started here and I've gone here and I'll just quickly fly it, send it back. And when you're doing these pulls, I'm not worried about perfection at that point. Now I'm looking for a creative effect. So it doesn't really matter if I get quite back to where I started. And sometimes I will wait and I'll leave it where I came to with the previous shot, and then I'll go back to the original starting point with the second shot or the subsequent shot.
And that's a sample of or an example of the difference between us. Whereas I have to have pin sharp focus.
Jason
I
doesn't
would
like-
zoom in,
Yeah.
focus, zoom back out, and shoot again. So that's just the difference
It's
between
funny,
us.
we don't argue about a lot of things with photography, but Jason is like very interested in the technical. He went to school previously for mechanical engineering, so, and I'm like, woohoo, what can I do with this?
One thing I'll say about infinity on your lens. A lot of places I've read online where just set your focus to infinity, and because it's far enough out that it should be in focus. I've been stung a lot of times,
Yeah.
so I have to zoom in, focus, and zoom back out. So don't trust infinity is what I'm saying
Yeah.
on your lens. I don't know what, maybe Canon lenses are different or Sony.
They're better.
Well, anyway.
It's not sponsored tonight. You can say
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so another question here we got from the email. This was from Annette. Do you ever use supplemental lighting for the foreground?
No.
I did once.
Did you?
I didn't include that photo. I wasn't really happy with it. I have during my exposure popped a flash a couple of times too, but all I got was a super bright back of the head. I didn't really experiment with it too much. I should have just turned it down to like a 64th and tried again, but it's a good idea. Or maybe a flashlight and paint some light on the back.
Yeah, that might be an interesting effect.
I might try that this year.
So the only thing I would say about that is, in this kind of an event, people are there to, sort of pay attention to the fireworks and enjoy that event. And I am very averse to bothering people. And, flash like that can really pull focus for observers. But
I mean, it might be interesting to paint those trees with some flashlight.
Yeah, if you do get into a place where there aren't people around you and you can go ahead and do that without bothering anybody, yeah, flashlight would be really cool because you do have 4 to 8 seconds to get in there and do some interesting creative. But I would never use a flash because I am always down with the humans and yeah. Thanks for that. That was an interesting question.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions on the type of tripods or heads that you like to use in particular?
For me, I've got a slick carbon fiber tripod.
Yeah.
I invested in carbon fiber just because I have to carry it around, and I just like it to be lighter. One thing I'll say about the tripod, I don't know if an inexpensive tripod has a little hook on the bottom of the center post.
That's really...
Get one with one of those.
Yeah, that hook
even
is
if you get
really
it
important.
used, because hang your camera bag on that.
Yeah.
Weighs down the and just makes your camera that much more stable.
And it also keeps your camera bag out of people's way because it's dark and people do come, unfortunately they come quite close to us when we're shooting. In the space that we're shooting at, sometimes there just isn't anywhere else for them to go, so that stabilizes your tripod and it keeps your camera, whatever other gear you have, safe underneath your tripod.
And I've actually hung my 70-200 on that hook.
Wow.
Just because and to keep it handy for when I want to swap out.
Oh, well, that's
that's one way to do it.
gutsy.
Head wise, it doesn't really, you can buy an inexpensive ball head. As long as it makes sure it has enough weight to hold your particular camera and lens.
Yeah, that would be the key thing. It has to be able to support your camera and whatever lens you're using.
You've got a really, really nice ball head.
Yeah, I have
I think really right stuff for whoever that is.
Acrotech, I think.
That's the plate, but
Acrotech plate? Yeah, I don't know what the
yours
best
is
one
really nice. It doesn't really matter. You can get away with an inexpensive, as long as it will hold your camera when it's under. If you've got a longer lens on it, so it's not creeping, that would be bad.
But I will say, if you're in Calgary and you're not sure about a tripod and you need to know what tripod to use for whatever event you're going, come to the camera store and they'll give you some really good advice on what you can use. Ask the experts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever do any kind of filming for fireworks? And if so, is the process much different for filming fireworks versus photographing?
Yeah.
Last year was the first time that I photographed or videoed fireworks with Sony cameras from the camera store.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really different because video is a completely different animal to this, especially with one thing I found was really difficult was focus. That tiny little viewfinder.
Yeah.
I would really have loved a separate monitor that I can see things nice and big.
Our video guys like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a real challenge. I mean, when it was in focus, they were beautiful because the 4K. The camera store was kind enough to lend us some Sony A7s, and it's amazing.
But it's a different process, right? When you're shooting stills, you're shooting, that's sort of more of a creative process, and you can kind of think about what you're doing there and what you might do with it later. Whereas video is by definition, it's kind of documentary. So.
And just technically, there's some different things that don't translate between the two. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of experience enough to speak, I guess, expertly on it.
That was the first year that we've done video was last year. So we're definitely not experts. Yeah, we were winging it.
Okay, here's another good one. Are there any photographers who particularly inspire your approach to firework photography?
Huh. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So this is where I'm maybe not as diligent as I could be. I've seen lots of beautiful photography, and I think the thing that I remember the most, or the work that I remember most, was from something in Hong Kong a couple of years ago. But I'm sorry I didn't pay attention to who the photographer was. I just remember it was spectacular.
And for me, it's not necessarily about a photographer that's known for fireworks, but David Nightingale.
Oh, David Nightingale's
He's a
such
photographer that
genius.
lives in Blackpool,
Blackpool,
England.
yeah.
And one of the things he said is look for the shot that nobody else has. And that has stuck with me. That's where I'm looking for weird things in the foreground and
Yeah.
shapes, and so that's where I was inspired actually from
Yeah.
him. Even though I've never, maybe he shoots fireworks, I don't know.
He does occasionally shoot
So,
fireworks.
yeah,
His sort of trademark thing that he was doing a few years ago was out on the beach in Blackpool. He would place objects and shoot them against the horizon, so it was almost impossible to tell how big the object was because of where the horizon was laying. So where Jason was shooting these little bitty people at GlobalFest, that playing with the scale of things is such an interesting technique, and it can just make those very epic photographs with that just disparity in scale.
Okay, and then just to wrap things up, can you talk a little bit about your post-processing process and how much time do you dedicate to it when you're doing a larger shoot like this for GlobalFest?
Yeah.
Me first or you?
Yeah, you go. We
Okay.
do really different things.
I try and get as much correct in the camera as I can. So I find, personally, I don't do a lot of post-processing on my fireworks photos specifically. It's generally cropping. I like to obviously use the dehaze tool like we talked about to help the smoke out. I like to turn my clarity up a little bit. That's kind of it. I'm not doing a lot of, I don't really care about turning the highlights, because they're fireworks, they're going to be blown out. So for me, honestly, it's not a lot. It's just some cropping, some clarity, a little bit of clarity, and some dehaze. And if I'm shooting up a little bit higher in ISO, I will run them through, this last couple of years, through Topaz Labs AI, the noise reduction software. Works beautifully. But that's it for me.
That's not it for me.
Yeah.
So when I'm going through the festival photos, I can go through those really quickly. I know what I'm looking for festival because we have a goal of things that we're going to deliver. But when I'm going through my fireworks photos, because I'm not technically great at it yet, I know that I'm going to have to go through there and figure out how am I going to make this look amazing. He's very good at the technical side of fireworks, and he will spend the front end time, and I'm happy to spend the back end time changing the color balance of the image, and kind of messing with focus, and adding vignettes and that kind of thing. So I will spend a lot more time with, just because I'm really interested in a atypical, creative looking, not standard image, because we have a team of 10 people that we shoot with, so they're going to get, the people that we're shooting for are going to get their images, and I want to follow up with something that's like, oh wow, we can't use that, but it's cool.
So yeah, I guess it's just two different styles.
Yeah, and you edit in Capture One?
More recently, I'm Capture One.
And I'm Lightroom all the way. I'm the latest version of Lightroom. I really, really love that program. It's good fun.
As slow as it is.
Fantastic. Well, before we wrap things up, I just want to, of course, thank you both so much for joining us and sharing some tips and some nuts and bolts about firework photography. There's a lot of great comments here of people saying that it was so valuable just to hear some of your expertise, and
thank you.
And it's such a great topic. So, thank you. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to share tonight?
Just get out there, get the basics, get comfortable, and then get
go
weird.
Have fun. Yeah. Have fun. This, especially people that are going to come to the seminar, the camera stores, or whatever else everybody else doing. It's important to enjoy the process and not stress out about, I have to get this. We're not going out on a commercial shoot here. We're going out to have a good time. We'd also like to say hi to, is it Stuart, who's dialed in all the way from New Zealand? Hi.
Yeah, Stuart Hampton. There's some people from all over the place, and of course lots of people from Calgary too. So
thanks everybody.
Thank you. And I just want to mention one more time for the locals that if you're not registered in our workshop, that's full, I do have another option for you if you want to check out GlobalFest. If you've never been before, I have some extra tickets. So you can email me, evelyn@thecamerastore.com. I'll send you the info for that. But again, big thanks to GlobalFest for working with us. We have such a great partnership with them. And if you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and you can also head over to thecamerastore.com and check out our schedule of all the different seminars, events, workshops, and of course these virtual events that we do right here on TCS TV. So until next time, we'll catch you again very soon.